Take a deep breath with that. We go on, but my point on this is reality and perception. There are so many perceptions. When you really start looking into it, the perceptions don't necessarily match the reality. But I guess one could say that everything, no matter what, is perception. So I ask you to look at your own perception. Your perception of the world, your perception of your place in the world, your perception of enlightenment, your perception of what it takes to allow the enlightenment, the embodied enlightenment. There's still a lot of perceptions right now that you have to work hard or suffer. That's ingrained in that little room, almost like a tiny little closet in the house of human consciousness. A little tiny closet stuck way off on the side has the word enlightenment barely legible on the door. And in that little tiny storage place, this is where the basis of enlightenment or consciousness is. It's very close also to a much, much larger room called religion and another large room called philosophy. But in this little tiny, tiny closet, stuck over on the side, a consciousness of enlightenment, what that is. Now, we played the game before in our gatherings and our workshops where I say, what is enlightenment? And after doing that for a number of years, I stopped asking the question because there were really no good answers. There's some bad answers, but very few good answers. And ultimately, the real answer is it's a feeling. Enlightenment can't really be defined. I guess you could define the net result of enlightenment, what you get as the human part, a better life, a healthier body, more happiness, although happiness is a really bad perception. Some funny things about happiness. But this whole thing of enlightenment is about perception also, a perception of what you have to do. In this little closet hidden away are a few of the known masters who have achieved enlightenment. But their stories, as we've talked about, are not so good. They're filled with suffering. They're filled with hardship, a lot of loneliness, a lot of angst. And at the end, perhaps you could say a total breakdown or death. Not such a good perception to have. I ask you to take a look at the reality and the perception of enlightenment. I ask you to take a look at then the feeling that you have about enlightenment. It's this thing that is above all other things in most of your lives. The most important thing, the reason you came here to this planet. But yet there's still an odd perception about it, a perception of how hard you have to work and all the philosophical, religious, and spiritual studies that you have to do to get there. And such a feeling, so often a feeling of being incomplete, unfulfilled, unsatisfied, or just not knowing the answer. The perception that there's still something wrong. There's still something you haven't figured out. Many of you go to bed at night saying, there's still something I'm not getting, like this is a test or this is some sort of maze that you have to get through. Still saying to yourselves, what is it? What is it? I'm just not quite there. Days that you feel you're making some progress, so to speak, but so often saying, what am I not doing right? The thing that you're not doing right is thinking about enlightenment, your perception of enlightenment, your perception of what needs to be done and what you're going to be like in enlightenment. My dear friends, there's really nothing that you have to do other than allowing, but that's perhaps one of the most difficult things that a human will do. Because there's such a tendency to say, need to keep working at something. I must have to do something like meditate or chant or douse myself in oils or one thing after the other. There's part of the human consciousness that just can't accept the fact that you can just allow the enlightenment. You don't have to force it. You don't have to work at it. It's not a game of power whatsoever. You don't have to push it. You don't have to wrestle with it. It's not something that the demon or even the darkness or even Satan is keeping from you. The darkness, your darkness, actually is hoping that you'll allow it, because it will free that darkness. It will free that suffering and that deep wound within. So perception, reality, perception and the reality of enlightenment. As the ascended masters would say, the perception of enlightenment is so far from what it truly is. The reality of enlightenment so very close, as in right here, right now. Okay, let's take a deep breath.